Hello and welcome to Total Health with Dr. Nick, where my purpose is to inspire, empower, and motivate you to live longer, healthier, and more abundant lives. And today I'll tell you, you've got a treat today. You're in store for the man that I'm going to interview today is legendary when it comes to inflammation, the keto diet, fasting, detoxification. I've known Dr. Dan Pompa for about 15 years now. We're paisans. And, this is a man who's truly lived what he's going to be going through or explaining to you. Dr. Pompa is someone who I know that his motto is pain to purpose. And if I ever had a person on my show who truly epitomizes going through the trenches, going through the battles, going through the adversity himself and coming out on top and having to figure out his own battles and his own illnesses, Dr. Pompa struggled at one point with a debilitating illness when it came to mercury toxicity. As a result of that, he used to be an elite cyclist, couldn't cycle anymore. He couldn't barely practice anymore. He was fatigued. He was tired, moody. Sound got to him. He had to figure out what was going on. And when you are someone that figures out what's going on, that makes you an expert. To me, an expert is someone who goes through the trenches, lives it, and then comes out on top. That's an expert to me. And so, like I said, his motto is pain to purpose. And what he's done now is turned his life into really a mission to help people around the world, thousands, if not millions of people, by starting an organization called Healthcare Centers of the Future. And with that, he's able to train thousands of doctors who then reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people virtually around the world by, like I said, training his doctors on cutting edge cellular detox, not just any kind of detox, true cellular detox, where you get right down to the cell level, not just a colon cleanse, inflammation, fasting. He's written this book, and this is why I had to get him on today, because this book, I'll tell you what, as you can see, I've created a lot of fans here. I can cool myself with this book, but it is value bombs. So with that, I bring you Dr. Dan Pompa, my paisan. Welcome, Dan.
Oh, Nick, it's been a long time. So glad to be here.
It has. It's like sometimes I don't talk to you for a while, but it's like we catch right back up again.
I know. It's so true. I think back to the days, right? It's like you and your wife have so many precious memories in my wife and I's brain.
Yeah.
So
we need to resume those again. So we'll have to take a trip out to Park City and visit you guys. So
absolutely beautiful here. Always a blue sky here. No humidity. That's the difference between where I am. In the summers, it's 80 degrees and no humidity, unlike hot Atlanta.
Hot Atlanta is just humid as anything. There's no ocean breeze. So anyway. But you know what, Dan? I was so impressed with your book from beginning to end. I mean, this book is a Bible for anybody who wants to know about fasting and beyond. I mean, it's literally just amazing. We're going to put the link down below, but you can get the book at the beyondfastingbook.com. That's where you can get a copy of it. I'm going to put the link in the description below so you can get it right there. I'll probably even create a hyperlink for it.
And you won't even find it on Amazon yet purposely. That's a pre-drop. So your audience is going to be one of the first to actually be able to get it before it's actually officially launched in a hardcover. So
okay,
little pre-launch here.
Terrific. Right out of the box, you're on page 2 describing fasting as transformative. You talk about some of the heaviest hitters of all time. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they believed in fasting. Now, I know you can't get right inside their heads at this point, but why do you think they believed that? What were they seeing back then when, they didn't have the science we have today to really know on a cellular level what fasting can do? What do you think they were thinking about?
Well, maybe that was the key. They didn't have the science to confuse things.
Yeah.
So, I'm an avid reader of studies, and the more you become an avid reader of studies, you get more suspicious of studies because you can make studies say what you want to say. Mm-hmm. So you get more clever at least reading them and looking at their methodology. But, look, they had to rely on what they had at that time. Mm-hmm. And those were obviously very wise men, the greatest teachers of their time. And they realized, I think their major premise all was that no man can duplicate what the body has done or God has done in our bodies, and that is filling it with this innate and meaning inborn intelligence. And what fasting does is it harnesses that innate intelligence. Look, you don't have to think, and this is always your message, right? It's even a chiropractic message. We don't have to think to heal our cut hand, right? And we don't need
Right.
medication to heal it either, right? We just have to make sure there's no infection. But a healthy body, it takes care of that too. But
Yeah.
the point is it literally sends cells there called stem cells, and it creates healing that nobody can even think about. A broken bone, a fever, whatever. The innate intelligence knows how to heal. In
Yeah. We like to say
fasting,
the body needs no help. It just needs no interference.
absolutely. And fasting is something intuitive to our bodies. When an animal gets hurt, it fasts automatically.
Mm.
Now, sometimes our bodies do the same, right? Whether it's a flu, something you get sick, you don't want to eat. As a matter of fact, it will purge itself. So it is in our gene code to fast. And look, when we look back at ancient cultures, even the healthiest ancient cultures, we know that they were forced into times of fasting. And I believe our DNA is set up for it. And I believe when we obey that, and today, because we have access to food at all times,
Yeah.
if we purposely are educated into the art of fasting and add this into our life, man, you take a healthy person and you make them healthier. You take a sick person and you remove the interference, and the body's able to heal. And that's what fasting does. It harnesses that innate intelligence.
It's funny you really kind of got right into my next question, which is DNA. You mentioned that it resets the DNA. Now, in our office, what we've gotten into is epigenetics, and we mention that a lot in our videos. And now we have the ability to, with a tissue sample of the inside of someone's cheek, take a DNA sample, have it sent off to the lab, get the report back, and then epigenetically look at someone's DNA coding, their DNA SNPs, as we call it, single nucleotide polymorphisms. And because of their certain genotype, we know what they would need as far as diet and exercise and optimal human performance and so on. But you talk about in a book that it actually resets the DNA. How is that?
Look, the good news is our DNA is not our destiny, right? The
Right,
dogma
right.
was, your mother had a thyroid condition. That's why you have it. Your father had diabetes. That's why you
We're
have
a
it.
victim of our genes.
Or, yeah, it almost doomed us into creating that. And by the way, that can actually be something that turns a gene on, is our thoughts. But what we've learned in today's day and age with new science is your DNA is not your destiny, meaning that genes are turned on. Believe it or not, Nick. Look at Nick, folks, and look at me, okay? The differences are apparent, good and bad for both of us. And, but the point
No
is
hair?
Nick and
Hair.
hair, gray hair, no gray hair. Well, it could be gray, we don't know.
At least I don't
But anyway,
show it. I take it all off.
That's right. But the point is that Nick and I have 99.9% of the same genes, and you as well. So wait a minute, what makes Nick and I look so different? It's the epigenome, meaning above that hard drive, like a computer, is the software, and that's the epigenome. So, what happens is influences, our thoughts, chemicals, stressors, our lifestyle, all can change that DNA. And so we become literally our environment. We become those thoughts of our parents and, all of it. And I know it sounds crazy, but we have the ability to change the software and become better or worse. So that's the good news, is your DNA is not the destiny. We can actually change that. And fasting is one of the things that we know resets and turns off bad genes that get turned on. So you can turn on a bad gene from emotional traumas. We've all had them, right?
Mhm.
Chemicals, right? There was a study, Nick, done. It was the Duke University study. They took two identical twin groups of mice. Same DNA, exactly.
Yep.
They put them in the same environment, exactly. Fed them the same, everything. They exposed one group to a toxin. It triggered a gene. Okay, this is the epigenetics. Turned on the gene for thyroid conditions, weight loss resistance. They became obese. And then that was inherited into the next generation, despite what they ate. Even though they ate a perfect mouse
So it
diet,
was
whatever
passed
they had,
down to future
they
generations.
passed down. So these epigenetic triggers are passed down. Now, how do we change them? Well, that was the best part of the study, is you can change them. Fasting is actually one of the things that can change it. It can turn off that bad gene and turn on longevity genes. So the point I'm making is that if we add fasting into our lives, we can actually turn off these bad genes. Great stuff.
I like to, a lot of times in my videos, I relate our genes to basically just blueprints, of course. And, you can have a factory that makes sporting goods equipment. And You can make tennis rackets, you can make golf clubs, you can make wiffle ball bats, whatever you want. Well, what determines the order, or what determines, what the factory is going to be making at that moment? Are they going to produce 10,000 baseball bats? Are they going to make wiffle ball bats? Are they going to make tennis rackets? It's the orders that come in. So the blueprints are there. They're just sitting there waiting in the warehouse to be used. And all of a sudden, an order comes in and says, "Hey, can you make me 10,000 baseball bats?" And cha-ching,
That's right.
cha-ching, cha-ching. Next thing you know, they're ripping out 10,000 baseball bats. Or they want tennis rackets. Can you make me 5,000 tennis rackets? And next thing you know, the tennis rackets are produced, all because of the outside orders coming in. So you're nailing it. It's exactly right. It's
No, I'm thinking of it this way. Let's say you're making baseball bats, right? And the process gets a little sloppy over time. The mold gets a little contaminated for the bat, right?
yep,
And all of a sudden you look at this product going, gosh, these bats, they're weak, they're flimsy right here. What's going on? And you look at your process and you realize, wait a minute, this is wrong. This is contaminated. This mold is getting rusty. And so you know what you do? You just kind of clean house and you start over with the whole process. And now you're making bats that are so much better. That's what a fast does. A fast retools the system, the process now all of a sudden these little plastic bats are good.
Right there. That's a value bomb right there. That's a great analogy, Dan. Yeah. No, in fact, let's talk about stem cells for a moment, because you mentioned in your book too that, right from the beginning, because you've got a very specific way that you do it. You've got a 7-week step course, or 7-week process, I should say, that actually can start to produce stem cells at a very early time. And, right now, cutting edge, you all hear about stem cells and how vital they are for hip transplants and knee replacements and other things that they can do with it. And you talk about in your book how it can actually help you start to produce stem cells right from the beginning. Talk
Right. Well, look, you don't just run a marathon, you train for it. At least if you desire to finish or have a good result, you better train, right? And likewise with fasting, because we live in today's day and age, most of us just can't fast, right? You can fast. Let me back up. I mean, if we just didn't have food, of course you'd fast. But how do we maximize the result? And that's really what the book is about. So week 6 is the actual fast. It's how to do a 5-day fast, and there's a reason for a 5-day fast. And week 7 is how you break the fast. So there's this 5-week basically training that you follow. And the book takes you through week 1, week 2, right, and up to the fast. And the whole point is to maximize the results of the fast. Okay, so you brought up stem cells. Something that happens during a fast, and it's called autophagy. And it's a word now that's become more popular, but just what it means is during a fasting state, your body will get rid of bad cells. These are cells that have bad DNA, so potential to cause cancer. These are cells that don't burn fat, even when you're not eating. They just want to burn sugar. Okay, so those are the cells that give you cravings, make you fail on diet. Those are the cells that are keeping you from burning your fat, so you stay thin. We don't want those cells. So in a fasting state, studies show that your body will get rid of not the good cells. It's that stinking smart. It will crush
that
those bad cells.
Intelligence.
That's it. It is. It's massive intelligence, and it will get rid of these bad cells. But here's the best part. When it gets rid of a bad cell, and by the way, this could be an immune cell that is driving your body to attack itself. That's called autoimmune, which so many people have. And it's why you don't feel well, why you can't lose weight, all these things, right? Why you have a thyroid condition. But it gets rid of those bad cells, and then it stimulates a stem cell to replace that cell. So literally, get rid of one, replace it with a new one that's actually able to burn your fat for energy. That sounds like a good deal. That happens in fasting. The 2016 Nobel Prize was won by a Japanese gentleman who really showed that that's taking place. And now that's been shown in further studies. So when we look at that process, we know there's a recycle renewal process that takes place. And I talk about that in the book. So that's what this process does. And the older we get, look, if you want to be old, with a number old, right? I'm 55 this year, and still be young. You have to go through this process. That's the point of adding even one fast, longer fast. And again, we'll talk about the length in a minute, to your whatever you're doing, and getting rid of these bad, creating new stem cells. And those are the ones that heal and make you young again.
Another thing you talk about too, I think people, when, they're going to do fasting for different reasons. Some people, obviously, because It could be spiritual. It could be that they want to lose weight. One thing you talk about, and I think so many people get caught up in, is the calories in versus calories out. You really talk about it in your book about how much it has to do with hormones, and hormones are really the key. Can you
Yeah.
explain that to my viewers?
So when I start part of the book by talking about the benefits of fasting, and by the way, that autophagy stem cell creation, the reason I take you through this week by week approach is so when you enter this fast day one or day two, you enter into this autophagy state. Otherwise, if you just do a fast, it may take day 5 or 4 to get into that state, or you may not get into it at all. So that's the whole point of this step by step. Chapter 1 is how to become fat adapted, where we're forcing ourselves to use fat as energy. Chapter 2, to your point, is don't eat less often. And so that's the point you're making is when you look at studies on anti-aging, nothing holds up except eating less, eating less. Now, in America, that means cutting calories, pushing food away. I can tell you long term, that does not work. Your metabolism gets lower and lower and lower as you push more and more calories away. So you may lose 10 pounds when you push calories away, but as time goes on, your metabolism lowers, you start losing muscle and gaining fat in the wrong places. Long-term lose. So when we look at studies and we say, well, if eating less, Dr. Pompa, is the only thing that holds up to becoming younger, better, literally, our cellular age gets less, then what do they mean then? How do we do that? Well, you eat less, not by cutting calories. You eat less by eating less often. That means you take this concept of fasting and you do it daily. And we call it daily intermittent fasting. So I fast at least, I would say at least 18 hours every day. Some days it's more, most days I fast more like 20 hours a day. So I literally don't eat. I'll get up, drink my coffee. And in my book, I talk about how to know if your coffee in the morning is actually okay in your fast, because some of us it is, some of us are not. So I have a formula to know if your coffee is okay. But this fasting time, you even get benefits from even a 13, 14, 15-hour fast, where you're getting some of this autophagy, getting rid of the bad cells in stem cell creation. So before we fast you for a 5-day period, we actually want you to start fasting in a daily window. And that's the point of eating less often is the key. And that extends your health. It extends your life, I should say.
And that's one of the other great benefits is longevity, like you said. One of the things we're seeing now that's happening more and more in the news, you're hearing more research about, is the mitochondria and the health of that. And you talk about in your book, metabolic mitochondrial fitness. That's a new term. I've heard about mitochondria, of course. I've heard other authors describe different things, but what do you mean by that? And how does that work?
Yeah. So look, the reason people struggle to lose weight today, you said something earlier that it's a hormone challenge. It really is. When you look at someone who struggles to lose weight or even feel normal, have energy, doesn't have brain fog, these are healthy hormonal people that don't have that problem. When you have that problem, these are unhealthy hormonal people. So what does that mean though? Okay, so when your mitochondria in your cells is how you make energy. That's where you either burn sugar or fat. And those are the only two things that your body will utilize for energy, sugar or fat. Healthy people have the ability to use sugar or fat. And when they're not eating, they use fat.
Yeah,
that's a hormone.
Go back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. It's the ability to go back and forth. And that's a hormone healthy person that when they're not eating shifts over and burns fat, which means when you're not eating, it's almost 12 o'clock my time, 2 o'clock. I haven't eaten yet today. I have not even thought about food. I'm not disciplined.
And your energy's high.
That's right. My energy's high. But the reason I'm not thinking about food and I have energy is because my body's burning my fat. Okay. It's using it as energy, but that's a hormone, a healthy hormonal system. Fasting, we have found, and again, I train doctors all over the world, fasting is the key to exercising your mitochondria where you burn fat. And when you stress it, they become more efficient fat burners and work better, which gives you better brain power, better fat burner, hormonally healthy. So just like you go to the gym and you work out, and if you adapt to the stress, you get stronger, better, feel better. Okay. Well, that's what we're doing with the mitochondria. What going with times without food, you're saying, hey, mitochondria, you have to adapt to this and start using fat. Bad cells don't adapt. So the body's, in its intelligence to survive, says, these mitochondria are bad, let's get rid of them. And it goes through, it's called mitophagy. So autophagy, the body eats bad cells. Mitophagy means your body, when you put it under a stress of fasting, will eat these bad mitochondria. And guess what it does? It creates, through fitness,
Beautiful.
better, stronger mitochondria that are better fat burners.
Yeah.
You know, you want mitochondria that are better, efficient fat burners. And all of a sudden you go, you know, I don't need food. I'm not having those cravings. Why?
I don't
Because
feel my blood sugar dropping.
That's right. Exactly. So you don't get the blood sugar rises and falls when you have healthy mitochondria. So if we can exercise them, then we're going to make better mitochondria, which means you're going to be a more efficient fat burner hormonally. Your hormones work better. So metabolic mitochondrial fitness is this process I take you through in the book to get better mitochondria.
You know, it's funny because I hear people all the time, they'll say my blood sugar dropped low. And I'm thinking you really should never, ever have low blood sugar because, like you said, when you're adapted, your body should automatically, like a hybrid car, go to burn fat for fuel. And if that gets too low, you know, your body will start to make gluconeogenesis. It'll start to make glucose if it needs it. But I think people are so used to having their sugar so high. They're so used to that, almost that buzz, that to them, it's as soon as it drops at all, they feel terrible. They feel terrible.
Well, Nick, here's what happens. In the book, I talk about what should happen in your fasting window, right? Even your daily fast. Let's say you're fasting for 15 hours. Well, let me explain what that looks like, right? And I explain it in the book. So if you eat 7 o'clock dinner at night, so 7 to 7 in the morning is 12 hours. So you can just simply push out breakfast another 3 hours. That's a 15-hour fast. It's pretty easy, right? And by the way, you could do it on the opposite end, right? You could eat breakfast and stop eating maybe at 4 or 3 o'clock at night. So there's many choices, whatever fits your schedule. But when you go in that 15-hour window, you're forcing your body to tap in to its fat. Now, here's what happens. So you end up getting a lower glucose, which is very normal, but something called ketones start to rise. Ketones means that you're using fat because then it makes ketones, which your brain likes to use for energy because your brain can't actually use fat. It can only use sugar or these things called ketones, which when your body starts burning fat for energy, it makes ketones to feed your brain. Okay, ketones heal the brain. In the early 1900s, we realized ketones to heal any neurodegenerative brain condition, right? Yeah. Today, we're getting back to realizing that these ketones can heal the brain. Oh, they can also heal your gut. How do we produce them? We have to get our cells burning fat, and then it makes ketones. So that's why chapter 1 of the book is how do you become this fat adapted person where you make these ketones that heal your brain, that can heal your gut. Oh, and by the way, I talked about studies that show that elevating your ketones turns off bad genes, right? So the point is that we want our cells to get fit, to burn fat, to make ketones that do all these wonderful things. And what happens is, again, as you burn fat, your glucose drops because you're not using that for energy, right, and your ketones rise. And I tell you how to measure that in the book.
Yeah, it's funny. You literally led me into my next question because you talk about in your book how you know if your mitochondria are fat adapted yet by measuring your ketones and your glucose and seeing how they're rising and falling and determining once again whether you're really in ketosis or your mitochondria are now fat adapted. Maybe you can explain that a little bit by taking.
Yeah. So one of the things, there's a meter that you can get for, I don't know, maybe it's $60, $70. It comes with glucose strips and ketone strips.
We always recommend Keto Mojo.
Yeah, exactly. Keto Mojo, you can get it. But yeah, it's a very simple, inexpensive meter, but you test your morning glucose and ketones. Okay, so you get up, test them. Let's make up numbers. Let's just say it's 85. And then your ketones, maybe they're 0.6. Okay, now you retest them before your first meal. Let's say your first meal is at noon. What we should see, if that fasting window is working for you, okay, let's just say you should see glucose trending down and ketones trending up. If you don't see that, I talk about what you can do about it in the book. So, that being able to see that glucose down, ketones up, that trend is what we want to see in a healthy mitochondria or a healthy cell.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that, in fact, I just did a video on this recently with my subscribers is, so many people get into where the keto diet for them, if they're in that diet, it's very rigid. And I said, listen, you sometimes have to change. You have to do diet variation. And I know you talk about that in your book. And I love the fact that in your book, you talk about how our ancestors ate. And many times they didn't know what they were going to catch or kill. They didn't know what was going to be in season at the time. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit, because that right there, I think that was one of the biggest takeaways is diet variation that people don't do that would get them out of these plateaus.
Yeah. I wrote a white paper on this topic, which is, a research paper. And I have a lot of studies that I talk about in my book. One of the keys to break through weight loss resistance and just really any health condition is with this principle called diet variation that I talk about. Feast, famine, cycling. I interviewed a scientist named Kristen Verde some years ago on my Cellular Healing TV podcast. And she was talking about how a diet of more variation, when they compared it to low fat, high fat, all these different diets, it worked better for weight loss. Meaning what they did is they took a standard American and they gave them a 500 calorie day. Okay, that was a fast day. And then they let them go back the next day and do standard American diet. So it was feast, famine, feast, famine. And she said it worked better than anything. I said, Kristen, why do you think that is? And she said, well, we believe it's the adaptation that we're forcing the body in. It has to adapt to those harsh changes. And it does it by hormone optimization. At least that's my word, meaning that your body optimizes its hormones to adapt. Look, the body, all it wants to do is survive. I mean, that's why we get better, stronger when we exercise. If you don't adapt to exercise, it becomes a negative. You do, you become stronger. Well, when you look at the hormones that get optimized during exercise, the same hormones get optimized when you change your diet. And the more change, the better. So believe it or not, staying on the same diet, whether it's vegetarian, vegan, paleo, keto, is actually not good. What we've learned is changing the diet seasonally, monthly, and weekly. And I give in the book strategies, and I think it's chapter 4 and 5. And I give these strategies on how to do it weekly and how to do it monthly. And let me just talk about, ladies listening, this is a huge tip right here. I mean, share the show just for this.
Because, paper. Here comes a value bomb.
Get paper and a pencil right here. So what we've learned, I don't care what diet you're on, if the week before your cycle, if you go high healthy carbs, it ends up magic for you. The reason is because you have so many hormone conversions happening right before your period that it wants insulin to help make the conversions. When you understand estrogen and thyroid hormone and some others, we know that insulin is a very important process of these conversions to active hormones. That happens before your cycle. That's all you need to know. And you get cravings the week before your cycle because your innate intelligence wants to help you make these hormone conversions. What we've learned is by taking someone on low carb, whether it's keto, paleo, and then low carb, and then in 5 days, right before their cycle, we bring up the carbs, whether it's more berries, more fruit, more sweet potatoes, yams, quinoa, whatever it is, 150, 200 grams of carbs a day. And then what happens hormonally, the rest of the month is magic. You break through weight loss resistance. Okay, now weekly vary. And then, by the way, it works for you too, but you can just randomly pick 5 days to go high carb, especially if you've been really strict on your diet. We look at weekly variation. In the book, I talk about 5-1-1. So maybe it's 5 days of paleo, keto, low carb, whatever it is. Pick one day where you fast, where you just eat one meal. Okay, that's it. Or maybe not at all. You pick it. Okay, so I typically do 2 or 3 days a week where I just eat one meal. And then you pick one day where you feast. You do that high healthy carb day, and mine's always Saturday. There's that is emulating feast famine. So what it does is it remind the feast day. I always say the feast day is as important as the fast day. So think of the fast day as mitochondrial fitness, forcing our cell, the mitochondria, to burn fat. The feast day is as important because what happens is that when you get very strict in diets and exercise, the body could go, I perhaps, this fat that I'm using for fuel, I want to hold on to it to save your life. So it slows down fat metabolism. And what happens is your body will start holding on to it by literally creating some insulin resistance. It will send water and fat cells, and you get this dimply fat, and you start losing muscle. And it happened to me. I was literally doing 50 grams of carbs a day, in ketosis, functioning great. And all of a sudden, I start getting belly fat. And I go, what did I do? I brought my carbs down to 20 grams a day. Getting worse, 10 grams. I was hardly eating carbs, and I was getting weaker in the gym. I was losing muscle and gaining belly fat. My body was in survival mode and started adding 1 or 2 feast days a week. Magic. Went, fired the fat burning machine right back up again and got lean again. So the feast is as important as the famine. And I have many different strategies in the book on how to add that in.
Would that be something that others would refer to as, say, carb cycling, where you're adding in some carbs on certain days?
Yeah, I mean, and again, there's strategies to it that are different for everybody that, as a group of doctors that I coach, that we've discovered on how to do it for different people, because thyroid people, adrenal people, women in general, they seem to need more feasts. And I teach you how to do that. But for some people, it's far less, so, and we even utilize high protein for some people instead of high carbs. So I'm not just a fan of just everybody doing it. You kind of have to know who you are. And I kind of talk about that, but high protein can act as a feast day as well. Yeah. And, it's a pathway called mTOR that we're actually stimulating. That's too complicated, but it's different.
Epigenetically, some people are even more predisposed to have higher protein than higher fat. And that's why, to me, the ketogenic diet is a great diet, but sometimes you have to look at someone's genetic SNPs to know, okay, would they be better with saturated fats or monounsaturated fats? Should they keep their saturated fats low and keep their PUFAs higher, polyunsaturated fats? Or should they maybe keep their fat percentage a little bit lower and raise their protein up? So yeah, it's very.
Yeah, and one thing it'll be interesting to see, Nick, for you clinically, is this is what we find is when you start adding consistent fasting in, the SNPs change. Because remember, the SNPs are only ideas, right? You could have a SNP and not express what's in there. Epigenetics, you can go around some of these SNPs. But fasting can change that, which is kind of cool. So I believe you're right. I always tell people, find what, kind of these, things that are for you, right? Like you do better with a little higher protein, right? But fasting can change that. I mean, that's pretty neat, because when we start to vary our diet, then we also create these genetic changes, just like fasting. So I believe that every culture was forced into changing their diet. When we looked at the American Indians, and I did a really replete study here, and it was pretty amazing. Even the Indians that lived in warmer climates still massively changed their diets, even how animals shifted. And they would go through times of what looked like vegetarian diets and times of very high fat keto diets. Obviously, winter, summer, seasons, droughts, all of these things really affect and force us into changing our diet. So one thing I've learned is, it's needed for everybody, despite your genetics. Dietary changes creates a hormone optimization, and it literally becomes magic.
What is the difference? You talked about your 5-1-1 rule. You also have the feast famine cycling of 4-2-1. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so the two is just some people do better with a little more mitochondrial fitness or need it. So that's where 2 times a week we actually do 1 meal or no meals, right? So we have 2 fasting days, and they can be back to back or random. So that's the difference. And I also even talk about a 3-2-2. where we're adding 2 feast days, 2 fast days. So there's even a little more variation in there. And some people need more variation. More hormonally challenged people do better with more variation, whereas some people don't need as much.
And on those days where you're eating more, those are also what we call the refeed days that you call in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I exactly. Feast days is what I love because it
Yeah.
sounds so fun, which it
Yeah.
is. And again, I mean, if you have any health challenge, the key is keeping the feast days healthy. Look, I do have people that write me and it's like, look, those are the days I eat pizza and pasta. It works. Kristen Verday's study was putting people on the standard American diet on the feast days, which I don't recommend. Okay, but I mean, the principle of hormone optimization works so well that technically, if you're healthy, all right, metabolically at least you can get away with it. But I think it's still good to eat healthy.
Yeah. I mean, there's even people had a McDonald's diet. I remember that back in the rage, back in the day. So in closing, I wanted to kind of get your take on this. I know you've got a really great way that you almost can schedule out your fasts where, maybe daily you have intermittent fasting and then one day a week you might have a complete fast and quarterly you do things. What would be your optimal schedule for someone over the course of the year to be doing longer fasts, and how long
Mhm.
would they be to your daily shorter fast? What is your best recommendations for that?
Yeah, as you go through the book, it kind of guides you in this variation principle and on a daily principle, what works best for you. There's the book Beyond Fasting and
Yeah.
beyondfastingbook.com. You can get the pre book, right? Be one of the first to get it. And there's recipes in there. There's all the strategies I'm talking about, and it answers Nick's question very good, right? Because what's good for one person is not good for the other, and you'll kind of learn that through the book. But by just starting with at least one fast day a week, that's that 5-1-1 in one feast day. And the book takes you through because I really want you to get fat adapted first. Some of you will realize you're struggling to get fat adapted, and then the variation principles start, and it walks you through that. But here's a big one. If you just set a goal for one 5-day fast a year, you're going to transform your genetics. You're going to transform your metabolism. You're going to transform your health in general because you're going to get rid of these senescent cells. Again, those are the cells that live too long, that age you prematurely. I believe we're genetically set up to have at least one fast a year. Now, I fast 4 times. Every quarter, I typically do a fast. And there's also, I educate you on something called a partial fast, which is where many of you might want to begin. It's 5 days of just 5 to 1,000 calories a day. And you still get this autophagy stem cell production even in a partial fast. And then you can work to a 5-day water fast later. But some of my clients and my doctors, patients, and clients that are very hormonally challenged, maybe with autoimmune, we do some type of fast every month or even every other month, whether it's 5-day partial fast, next month, 5-day water, 5-day partial. So there's a lot of different strategies in there depending on what you're dealing with. But the point is we need to fast, and the book gives you really a choice of what type of 5-day fast. And the reason I said I was going to get to this, Nick, is that the reason for 5 days, I've been into fasting since the 90s and learning about it and teaching about it. I learned early on that it takes most people about 3 days. And by day 4, they start to get a lot of the benefits. So we would ride those benefits out for one more day. And I evolved into this 5-day fast. That was years back then. Now, today, we have science that shows 5-day fasts seem to be a really critical number. So day 4, most people hit max autophagy. That's why clinically years ago, we would see them just break through and go, I feel so much better now. The first 3 days were really hard, but now I feel better. So we know that max autophagy happens day 4. So we want to go to at least day 4. But something magical happens day
And that's
5.
just a water things, right?
And this is just water, right? What I'm talking about. But by the way, even partial fasting, we see a reflection of this, benefit day 4. We see a maximum hormone optimization day 5, reflected by this spike in growth hormone that's very significant day 5.
It'd pay a
So
lot of
one of
money
the
for that.
strategies, yeah, no, exactly. So one of the strategies I talk about is even not exercising through the fast, but day 5 exercising, because the growth hormone is so high that you get this like boom. With the exercise, you push growth hormone even higher, and then you come home and you break your fast correctly, which is chapter 7 of the book.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the bottom line though is that this is strategically mapped out for you to maximize the fast, but the 5 days is just a magic number. And I always say, I do a chapter also on extended fast. Some people can benefit from even longer fasts, and you hear those stories in the book, like 14 days, 20 days. But most of us.
One time where you had a guy there, I want to say it was a 120-day fast. Was that right?
Yeah, he was on. You're 100% right. He came to my seminar. He was a patient of one of my doctors, and he was on 120 days of a fast. Now, he was morbidly obese, and he was on 14 medications, which at that time, I think he was off of, I think all of them at that time, with his doctor's supervision, by the way. And always fast with doctor's supervision, because certain medications can be an issue. I talk about that in the book. But the bottom line is he was on 120 days. He had lost over 100 pounds at that point, and he was able to come up. He was like, "I'm fine. I'm fine."
Yeah.
Anyways, the bottom line is there's a time for extended fast, but most of us will benefit from multiple 5-day fasts, and I talk about that in the book.
Yeah. Well, guys, I could tell you, I gave Dr. Dan a lot of questions, but the bottom line is we just touched the tip of the iceberg here. That was it. You got to get this book. This book, I'm telling you, it is going to be your Bible or go-to Bible for fasting. And Dan, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Last thing I just want to know is when you're getting the Nobel Peace Prize. When's that coming?
That unfortunately is not up to me. So the answer is, I don't know.
I'll nominate you, man. But brother, thanks so much for coming on. You are a true friend, and I think you gave everybody so many value bombs today. They're going to have a lot to think about. A lot of people.
Thanks for having me. I love you and your family, so appreciate serving there. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. So I will talk to you guys later. This is Dr. Nick. I love and appreciate you. We'll see you next time on Total Health with Dr. Nick. Bye-bye.